Welcome, aloha. Thanks for joining us on ThinkTech Hawaii, Rule of Law in the New Abnormal. And we have with us today, returning for first time as a duo in a while, Jeff Portnoy, one of our leading First Amendment lawyers and longtime experienced litigation professional in civil litigation, Ben Davis, retired professor from the University of Toledo School of Law, visiting professor at Washington Lee School of Law, and probably more prospects in the future with a lot of experience in Europe as well. Jeff, Ben, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Well, you folks are very experienced in both the practical business side and the academic side of freedom of thought and expression. What's going on with the challenges to that now? Are those different than something we've seen in earlier years? Jeff?
Well, it's a very broad question. I don't know if you're talking about specifically the Communications Decency Act or some other challenges. There's lots of other challenges, but primarily the legislative challenge is attempts to restrict Section 235 of the Communications Decency Act, which has permitted the hosts of various websites to escape any kind of liability for any of the misinformation that's posted on their websites. And frankly, I teach at the University of Hawaii and I teach media law. I predicted within the first year that at some point Congress would realize that they had created a monster, even though I'm a big First Amendment expert, and it would just take time for various Congress people to have their ox gored by that immunity, and we'd see efforts to amend it. And that's what's going on now. That's why they're calling the Google people and the Facebook people. And, it's funny because it's the conservatives that are now taking that over because of, taking Trump off of TikTok and I think they took him off of some other Facebook sites. Now they put him back on. So it's interesting because the poster doesn't get that immunity. You or I wouldn't have that immunity. So if you could figure out who that person was, you could still pursue whatever remedies you could pursue as if they had written a letter to the editor. But the curious difference was that if you write a letter to the editor and say the same things that you say now on social media, the newspaper is equally responsible for the statements made by the letter writer, but the host isn't. So that's what's going on right now, is to try to place some culpability on hosts who have claimed that they're nothing more than a bulletin board. So, that's a 3-minute explanation of what this is all about.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I saw something recently, or was reading something recently about, I think this girl who had been basically groomed on a particular site from 11 to 14 years of age. It's a site, I can't remember the exact name of it. It was kind of blurred, but it's basically a site that sets you up with random contacts with other people. And of course, they set her up with a pedophile, right, who groomed her and all kind of stuff. He ended up being, based on his address, the Royal Mounted Police was able to identify who he was, and he got arrested and he's serving 11 years up in Canada, right? But the girl...
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Ben.
Go on.
I was going to say, I'll give you a new concept. How about parental responsibility? How's that for a new concept in the last 5 or 10 years?
Right. But,
who is more responsible for what your children are watching on their phones or their iPads or their computers than their parents?
So what I would say is yes. On the other hand, what I found interesting here was that I guess the girl's got a lawsuit against the host entity, but the argument is products liability, which just means that the way that the software is designed is like is defective and it's not about sort of what's posted or not, but it's like the way you set yourself up to be in the space is actually defective, like, you know, a defective car or something like that. I thought that was kind of an interesting
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, when you have, you know, how many millions of lawyers, there's always somebody out there that's going to come up with a novel approach to try to get around some other prohibition that would make your lawsuit fail. And, you know, that's, I can't respond to that, except I think it's brilliant as a strategy, you know, whether it has any validity or not, but it's a way to get around the First Amendment. Look, there's no question that the proliferation of the dark web and the ability of people to do horrible things on there, either bullying or sexual, you know, trafficking, pornography, criminal activity, spying, you know, that the problem is the law hasn't caught up with the technology and never will, by the way.
Yeah.
By the time a case is decided, the technology is 2 years above it and greater.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, so now Congress, as typical, say, you know what, we're going to go after big tech. You know, they're doing all kinds of horrible things, but they created it.
Mm-hmm.
Congress created the problem that they're now worried about because, as I say, they didn't like what they did to Trump. And, you know, there are other aspects. I just pointed out all the other terrible things that are going on. But, you know, I'm not shocked. I mean, I never did quite understand the total immunity. Now, there are some exceptions. For example, if you're a web host and you do review the postings, you take on liability.
Right.
So why would you review them?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, it's crazy.
I see nothing.
Yeah. So, you know, you have to admire the hosts that have decided that they'll, like Facebook now, you know, it took them a long time, but they have, what, hundreds of people that are reviewing posts to try to see what should be eliminated. But, you know, there's a tremendous irony there. So, you know, and then there's the whole political correctness and the whole woke culture. And, you know, you can't say anything to anybody that hurts their feelings. And I know people have different views on that. And you and I have sparred on that, Ben, ourselves.
Right.
But, you know, it's all part of where America is, Chuck, in 2023, which is not a very good place.
Well, that takes me to a couple of different places that are fun. One is you saw this thing about the teacher out at that university in Minnesota who showed an ancient, you know, like a picture actually done by a Muslim of Muhammad, an image of Muhammad that was you know, like the 7th century by a Persian Muslim as part of what he was doing. And you had students who were upset among the Muslim students. And then you had a president of the university who was saying that, if I remember it right, it was saying that this was Islamophobia and all hell broke out. And then you had the national sort of head of the care that said, no, this was not Islamophobia. You know, I mean, this, you know, it's like, let's throw around a phrase that's going to cause all kinds of consternation. That's kind of like a effort that ends up with this teacher losing her job, right? And she's like, these aspersions are being cast on her when she's trying to do just an ordinary, I think it was like an art history or art religion history done in a tasteful way, trying to tell everybody, giving everybody heads up. I mean, she looked like she went the whole 9 yards. And then it's like blown up and she's lost her job. And now I think there's a vote of no confidence from the faculty to the president of the university. I mean, it's just, I was like, that has gotten a little crazy. Now, I want to give you an analogy, which is an older one from the 30s. Okay, now granted, Hamlin's a private school, but in the 30s, there was some guy who taught at Toledo who was kind of a pro labor union guy, and you used to have those anti-labor companies you can imagine in Toledo in the car industry space that was really upset with the university about what he would preach and write about and all that. And the university was like, hey, academic freedom. And they shut it right down just like that, and I says, you don't feel that anymore. You don't feel any sense of that as being a value. It's like if the governor is starting to make noises, if the trustees start to make noises, they've got like little or no respect. It seems in a number of places for even the concept of academic freedom.
Oh, I don't think there is any more academic freedom. I don't think anybody can legitimately say there is. And listen, I could give you a personal anecdote. As I say, I taught First Amendment law at the University of Hawaii Law School for several years. And I made it clear I haven't taught in 3 years, but just to show you, this goes back 4 or 5 years. I made it clear at the very first class that I ran a very freewheeling class and that I was dealing in case law that dealt with, Skokie and, hate speech and everything else. And I was not going to pull any punches.
Right.
I was going to talk about the facts, and I was going to engage the class in debate on whether something is hate speech or whether the courts or could stop certain speech or whatever. And I made it clear the first week. And I said, if you don't want to be in this class, please transfer now. Okay? Okay. So at the end of it, no one left. And we had a really good semester. And as you know, Ben, you got some kids that are really engaged and some kids that are staring off into space. But it was a very good class. And we had some really good debates. It was one, they were debating the K case. We debated the K case, and gay rights. And I didn't pull any punches. If the case used language at the time, I repeated the language,
right,
et cetera. Okay. And I asked the kids, okay, don't back off. At the end of the semester, they do evaluations. And I asked to see the evaluations because I want to get better. And candidly, 99% were really positive. And one said I was a sexist and a racist. All right?
Yeah.
Now, the law school said, forget it. We could care less about this, But my point is, where's the academic freedom? I mean, it's not there anymore. You've been teaching for how many decades? I don't think you're teaching the same way you did 20 years ago. I would be very surprised and proud if you were.
Yeah. What happens if after when you've been doing it a while is that you start to say, okay, here come the evaluations. The evaluations, there are going to be some people who love me and there's some people who are going to hate me. Thank you very much. Okay, there you go. And that, you don't try to change what you're saying. But I do know, the whole thing about worrying about triggering people.
Yeah.
That is something that I think I'm probably more sensitive to than I was back when I first started out. Trying to sort of, I don't know, to prepare the class for something and to see what, and even have them do anonymous votes about things. I was teaching a class where we were dealing with torture. I wanted to show some of the scenes from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and I said that, I don't know people's lives. I don't know what they've had to experience. So I want to ask, if there's anybody in the class that's got a problem with this, I won't show it, and I had them do a secret ballot where they tell me whether it was okay or not for me to do it. It turned out the entire class said, go ahead and do it, but, those kind of things, you felt that you gotta be careful because, it's just like there was that situation where there was a professor who touched a student's arm, and it turned out that particular student had gone through some very traumatic physical violence, and it became a whole thing, right? Um, I think I'm probably being more aware, but the thing that I'm more concerned about than that is the situation where it's the top down stuff, right? It's the head of the university or the governor, or this kind of stuff of trying to sort of tell you what you can say, tell you what you can't. The whole thing with the College Board and the AP African American histories, and you see the College Board, which is a business, essentially caving to. If they're not going to say they're caving, but they essentially go along with making some adjustments as opposed to staying with what they had originally done.
Hey, look, when they're now accusing Dr. Seuss of being a racist and a sexist, I mean, the country, I don't think anybody that's watching me before knows I'm a fairly liberal guy, and I'm definitely a free speech guy. But it's crazy. The country is just crazy when it comes to hurting somebody's feelings for a billion different reasons. I mean, people want us to become robots.
Right.
So to me, it's a horrible, horrible, deteriorating situation. And I blame the left. I blame the far left, for not allowing conservative speakers on campus, for promoting this woke culture about, you can't do or say or dress or do anything that may offend anybody in any way because you can't hurt somebody's feelings. Give me a break. I mean, I don't understand. I understand it, and it's very unfortunate.
Right. So that's part of the fun of all.
And by the way, as I've been accused many times when I've had this debate with people, professors and others, that's because I'm a white male and I don't appreciate what it means to have all of these horrible things pushed upon me. That's the response I always get. I point out occasionally that I'm also Jewish. Does that count?
Right. So with regards to your white male Jewishness, I will point to you that I'm a black male Jew. So there we go. All right. So you can't play the Jew card on me, man. Okay.
You don't need that. You have everything else. Well, the male part. You don't have the male. You have the black part, so you're okay.
Yeah. But the thing that it's two things I'm going to say because I'm just reading things now. Okay. I just recently read. One is a 1901 book called The Marrow of Tradition by a guy named Charles Chestnut, an African-American writer. It's talking about the insurrection in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yeah, I've read a couple of books on that.
All right, but it's like a historical novel. This book really struck me as like a Rosetta Stone on American race and a race in America and America more broadly in terms of the class stuff, and there's class and race and gender going on in there. And that's not the kind of stuff that you would learn back when I was in school. So I'm talking about a level, I'm talking about ignorance here, okay? I'm not talking about being woke. I'm just talking about not knowing stuff, right? The other thing is another book that is actually somebody's dissertation. It's called Charity Signs for Herself, okay? She's passed away, a lady named Montgomery. And what she did is she looked the period between 1865 and 1876 on the plantations that my ancestors were on in Somerset Place in Edenton, North Carolina, Fawnsdale, Alabama, and looked at all the class, race, and gender relations right in that period, right? And I got to tell you, it's tremendously interesting to see the complexity, not which one of those things, class, race, or gender, is operating at any point in time. It's different. Which is the dominant one? It's different. But she does this wonderful presentation, and so you see, to me, it's like I don't look at it as a critique from the left. I look at it as a critique across the spectrum of what is said and what is unsaid in America.
Well,
right?
I completely agree with folks who argue that the way American history was taught up until maybe the 1970s or 1980s
Yeah, well, we were in school.
was completely skewed. And I have gone out, I've gone to a bunch of plantations. I've now spent a week on the Civil Rights Trail. I'm just using about that.
Yeah, sure.
The stories about World War II and how America treated Jews, going back to what we did to Mexico. I mean, the Indians. I am in perfect agreement that there was a total lack of balance and that the history that we were taught left a lot out.
It did. It's deep, isn't it?
You can also go the other way.
Right.
And I don't think we found the balance. And I think what we're seeing, like in Florida, is a reaction.
Sure.
So no, we want to go back to what America is and was. Let's put the flag out. I mean, I watched the Super Bowl and it's like, I hate it. I love the football, but I can't take all the rest of this stuff.
Right.
It's just like, yeah, we got warts. We've always had warts. Sometimes they've been cancers.
Right.
So let's get it out there. But, the reaction is, like I say, in Florida and Texas, is not helping things. It's making things worse. But I do think you need to teach this stuff. And, who teaches civics anymore, by the way?
Thank you.
Who teaches it?
Right. Well, like, there's so many things. Like, I went out to James Madison's plantation, Montpelier, which is not too far from here, and did the tour and all that stuff. And, one of the things that I learned, is that in 1824, the Marquis de Lafayette, Lafayette, all right, he was doing his grand tour around the United States, as sort of remembering the great old days of the Revolution, right? He goes and visits Madison and says, basically spends time with Madison, only talking to the slaves, enslaved people to start with. And then at the dinner table, he's hassling Madison about freeing his slaves, right? I heard nothing about this when I was in school, that there was this kind of, the Marquis de Lafayette, the one that I'd learned about during this, but beyond that, I think that there's so many parts of the social realities that were underpinned the different things that happened in our country. You can talk about the union movements. You can talk about the stuff in, in Harlan County, Kentucky, right? Talk about, I just read something about Leland Stanford was part of exterminating the Native Americans in California. You know what I mean? I mean, there's like stuff that I had no clue about that I'm just learning.
Yeah,
today,
but you're not gonna take down his campus. I mean, that's the balance. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, yeah, should we learn that Thomas Jefferson had a child by one of his black slaves? Why didn't we learn that? And that he had slaves, right?
Right.
We should learn that. But at the same time, we shouldn't say, let's take down every statute of Thomas Jefferson because he was a slaveholder. I mean, you know what I'm talking about? Where's the balance?
Well,
Where's the balance?
All right, except for one. No. So this is the fun of it, So I go to the Supreme Court. There's a huge statue of Chief Justice John Marshall inside the Supreme Court of the United States, right? And later on, I find out that he, was like a avid slave owner. He had like 300 slaves over his life. So, I'm like, okay, there's the equal justice under law. And then, some of the decisions, McIntosh, the one about, it's like, I want to tell you, I felt uncomfortable for having been happy to take a picture in front of it, But I'm going to tell you another one. Wait a minute.
No, I'm not going anywhere. We only have 3 minutes. That's what I'm saying.
All right. Yeah. So all I'm going to say is that statues have moments when they were put up and the role they were supposed to play when they're put up.
Yeah,
that are really important to keep in mind.
sure.
The lost cause and the revisionist vision of the Civil War, and
Yeah.
basically, as tools of white supremacy being one. But there could be for other kinds of things that are there, and so they're not just these sort of passive things. They actually were tools of some
Yeah, and
kind
I
of
understand.
ideology.
I understand. But things. Whenever I go to plantations, and I've been doing it for 20 years, for the first 15 years, there was a white elderly woman who was the
Yeah.
guide, who told us how wonderful things were on the plantation, how the plantation owners were benevolent, and
Right.
their slaves were treated like children. Now, in the last few years, the guides are mixed,
Yeah.
and you're getting a full story,
Right.
which is great. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't have to revisit everything, just balance it. Now
Just
you're
tell the
getting the
story.
story about how they lived and how, what the situations were, and I find it fascinating and great, but I want a balance. I don't want it to go completely the other way, that every slaveholder should have been assassinated. I mean, there is a balance, and I didn't live then, but I certainly appreciate what I'm hearing now, which is a balance. And I'm just
Right.
using that as an example.
Right. And what I'm going to say is that when I see the Supreme Court of the United States trying to go back to look at traditions of ordered liberty in the United States,
Okay.
all right, and they're looking at those periods, and I'm like, I don't know, man. You know what I mean? I don't know. But I'll leave that for another discussion another day. Okay.
There's not the word woman, I believe, doesn't appear in the United States Constitution. I think that's true. I heard that the other day. I mean, I should have known that, but it was amazing.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. What are we going to say?
All men are created equal.
Right. There we go. Well, this,
so in our last
hierarchies, between the femme couverte, right? You would marry a wealthy daughter of a wealthy planter, and then you get access to the lands, and you own the lands and the enslaved people by marrying. But she would essentially have to be in this very restricted role, and she's bringing all that, and those kind of things is what I'm reading about. It's deep, man. It's deep.
So we're out of time for today, but wanted to thank you both for bringing out some insights that may help us get a little more grounded and centered and focused on what's important here. The diversity of the learning experience itself is essential to be able to achieve the balance. And one of the things we're hearing encouraging from both of you is that the youth want that diversity of multi-experiential, multi-perspective learning opportunities, and they want to be able to engage in the critical thinking and the critical dialogue about it. That's key to their learning. Hopefully, we'll be able to redirect our focus and priorities to honor that need, to honor that interest in that.
They'll have to move to other states, though, if they're in Florida or Idaho or Texas, if they want any kind of an opportunity for diversity of learning, because it's going the opposite way in certain jurisdictions.
If I could just add one last thing, which is I remember there was a professor teaching at a university, teaching environmental law, and in that state, you were not allowed to mention climate change. You're teaching environmental law, and you can't mention climate change. I mean, what are you going to do?
So, Ben, Jeff, thank you so much. There's a lot of work to be done, a lot of reorientation of our priorities and the people who we really need to serve with our learning experience and our choice-making processes. Thank you both. Welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii. Come back and rejoin us. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Take care and aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.